welcome everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is Adam from the N+1 podcast and Miller's Custom Guitars. I'm so glad you could tune in. This show is all about passions and people that are passionate about different things. You know, we bring on guests to just talk about the things that they're passionate about, whether it's hobbies or obsessions or home birth. Like my sister just gave a successful home birth a couple weeks ago. That was an interesting episode when she came out and talked about that. And we're still falling in love with my new niece. That is amazing. Or whether it's something less traumatic, like, in a recent episode, I was just thinking back when we had Becky Orabello on, and she talked about the amazing laser cut jewelry that she makes. It's so beautiful. That was cool. That's a great episode you can go check out. Today, we're going to talk about one of my passions, which is music and guitar. And we're going to bring on a actual guitar builder. And we ain't talking about some like run-of-the-mill hobo that makes guitars out of his shack. We're bringing in Doug Cower from Cower Guitars, who makes the most amazing guitars. Doug, welcome. Hello.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me here. Though, to be fair, I think most of us who do this for a living are just one step above hobo status at all times. Maybe even not quite above it anymore.
Man, I'm just pleased as much. I'm so thrilled that you could come on the show, and it is my genuine pleasure that you could come here. You know, we talk about everything, whatever. So, this isn't a guitar show. This is an everything show. So if you're listening and you don't know things about guitars, which is, maybe a lot of people, us guitar players, you might think of it like cars, like there's Fords. And then there's Toyotas, and then there's like Ferraris, right?
Sure.
And, Doug Cower and Cower Guitars makes really super nice guitars. They're definitely in the high echelon of guitars, and they happen to be made right around the corner. I live in Sonora. He makes them in Sacramento, Elk Grove. And I had the genuine pleasure of getting a brief shop tour when I was there a couple of weeks ago. And as a amateur hobbyist guitar builder, this is just my kidney candy shop. Like, I was just walking around, my eyes like this big, walking around. Ooh, what's that? Ooh, what do you do for that? How do you do this? How do you solve this problem? Oh my gosh, it was so amazing. And for other people, they might just be like, okay, this is wood. These are machines, like who cares? And I was just drooling, and then I turned the corner and you had a Plek machine. And once again, for people that don't understand this, as a guitar tech myself, seeing a Plek machine absolutely blew my mind. So I want to talk about some of these things, but I wanted to start, and I like to start with every guest. And I just like to say, okay, you're building guitars. Let's just start at the beginning. So
Sure.
How would you classify what you do? Like maybe your industry and what you do, maybe describe it. And I always say, describe it like you would to a 5-year-old, right? And then you can go up from there because, we're adults, right? But how would you describe what you do?
Well, I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head here. So I build guitars, obviously. I mean, that's what we're talking about, for a living here. And that started, my dad was a cabinet maker. I grew up working in the shop my whole life. I've made furniture. I've made cabinetry. I've built cars. I played guitar. And, I think a lot of us on my side of the industry tend to be in the very similar interests, building things primarily, and so I kind of fell into it, and, it became that thing where, I grew up, like you said, right, Chevy, Ford. Okay. I played Stratocasters, which is, let's say Ford because it's the F, and like I was into that. Sure. And it was kind of this thing, even though I worked with wood my whole life and I could build a, small block Chevy or build a transmission or whatever. It, like, the idea of building a guitar seemed kind of like this mystical art that, Moses came down from the mountaintop and bestowed upon two people or whatever. It didn't seem like a real thing. And then it kind of, basically the story kind of goes, this piece of maple came in the shop that I think we were just going to turn into crown molding or whatever. And, it was just part of a pile. And I kind of knew at this point there were, like, you could buy like a neck from Warmith and you could kind of do some of the stuff. And I I said something kind of casually offhand to who is my wife now, but was my girlfriend at the time. And I was like, I should build a guitar someday from this. It's a cool piece of wood. I could probably do that. And like all of the I would say like the very specific guitar skill sets, fretwork, wiring, that kind of stuff, my father-in-law did and knew how to do. And so when I kind of started putting all this together, I think he was waiting for that spark to fire in my brain that, my, again, future son-in-law has been working with wood his whole life, and he plays guitar, and he likes making stuff. I'm going to help him make this neuron connect and show him how to, how fretwork works and all that stuff. And it just kind of clicked. And I didn't know at the time, and it wasn't for a while, that there was a whole boutique industry, like, the local guitar
Yeah.
store, the air quotes boutique side of it would be just the thing you hadn't heard of. And that would be like, I don't know, Court or Ibanez or, some big, not to throw shade, but like still a company that distributes worldwide and makes 300,000 guitars a year or whatever, right? Like
Yeah.
Taylor was my idea of what a boutique company was. And this is like late 90s, early 2000s when they were maybe,
Yeah. If you wanted a custom guitar, you bought like a Carvin or something.
yeah, exactly.
Like it had the
Or
custom specs, and
you would see like in guitar magazines, like that esoteric, like your Joe Perry and some guy that you had to know and meet in a parking lot would build something over 20 years. Like,
right.
again, I didn't realize there was like a scale of this. And I think to some extent in the late 90s, early 2000s, there wasn't as much of that. It starts to become more of a thing with the internet. And I just kind of fell into it. I started making stuff, and I was making like strap bodies and telly bodies and for friends, and and running them on the equipment at the shop, and then started designing my own things, and then it kind of caught. And I met some people in the industry kind of very early on that are again kind of big names in the boutique industry that were really big supporters for us, and just kind of encouraged me. And 15 years later, full time, or I've been doing it for full time 15 years now, and it's still a daily grind uphill battle. But we've got, I think we've crossed over 2,000 guitars now in all these years that we've built.
Oh my
And
goodness.
some major people play them, and some most
Yeah.
of the people who own our stuff are just people like you and I, and
Yeah.
middle-aged dudes with some disposable income, maybe.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
pre-kid
That's
people.
awesome.
So it's kind of right at those two ends of it.
I have so many follow-up questions. I was running out of room on my paper here. So your story basically started, you just found a hunk of wood that was too pretty to use for crown molding.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, it was just like too nice.
Yeah, I mean, like,
do you still have that guitar?
I do, actually. I never finished it.
Nice.
I got it.
That's so fitting.
Oh yeah. Part of what happened was in the late 90s, in like 98, 99, my dad, so we had the cabinet shop, and my dad was like one of the first cabinet shops in the Sacramento area to buy a CNC machine. And
Yeah.
kind of coincidentally, I was wrapping up high school, and my senior year, or my junior year, I should say, I took pre-calculus, and I realized that's as far as I'm ever going to go in math. Like that was it. I struggled through that one, and for whatever reason, my school offered AutoCAD as a math class, and so I took that my senior year, and which I really enjoyed.
That's awesome.
And we definitely didn't like draw lewd images on other people's saved work on their and mess around the whole time. That didn't happen at all. But like that kind of happened coincidentally where my dad bought the CNC, and it became like he bought. Okay, so technically it's called a point-to-point router, and it was kind of, it's a CNC machine, but it was streamlined for cabinet work. So it had the router and a tool changer with a drill head and a saw blade, and like his cabinet design software would do like all the programming essentially. So you draw a kitchen, and it would figure out where all the holes need to be and send it out to the CNC.
Right. Sure.
But you can also make stuff from scratch on it, and, but you had to kind of know a rough way through AutoCAD. And so it just became my job when he was like, hey, I need, this arc cut piece to make this valance. Can you program that? I was like, yeah. And so that's just kind of became my job. And that's kind of how this whole thing connected, was that, that piece of maple came in, and I pulled it aside and I was like, I'm going to keep this for something. And so I programmed, and oh man, it's so archaic. So I couldn't import the software that drove the machine. I couldn't import, what was the deal here? I didn't have a copy of AutoCAD that would actually talk to it. So I had to draw everything inside of it. So I couldn't really use like which turned out you could find, Telecaster drawings and stuff online and get DXF files. But I remember
Yep.
the first thing I ever did, I like literally took like a Paul Reed Smith and I printed it on like transparency paper and then like stuck it to the monitor and then like freehand drew the shape
Oh my
in
goodness.
its program by like tracing it on the screen and then kind of worked everything out from there. And actually, given it was a carved top and kind of stuff that we don't even do these days. It was pretty complex for what it was for our first
Yeah.
stab. And I bought a Warmoth neck to make it all work. And like, it's cool. It's still at the shop. I got it all the way through it has color and like I think Steeler on it. And then I think I just made enough mistakes on it that I wanted to start the next thing, and I just kind of shelved it and reused the parts and
Nice.
started the next one,
Yeah.
and then started the next
Interesting.
one and started the next one and the next one, and here I am.
Yeah. That's so interesting because, and I mentioned to you that the way I kind of got into, amateur hobbyist guitar building was my buddies that I used to jam with, I used to be in a band with, they were a family. It was like three brothers,
Mhm.
hi, Dennis and Sean and Ryan, if you guys ever listen to this, that they were part of a family run cabinet shop also.
Oh,
Very
nice.
similar. They had a CNC, like it was like almost the exact same scenario. And my buddy Dennis was like, hey, I got the CAD files for a telly body. So if you want to get some wood, we can make some tellies.
Sure.
And I bought a flat of ash from Minnesota. I spent like $700 on two 8-quarter slabs of ash.
Sure.
And it was like the ash was like $400, and then the shipping was like $300 to get this stuff. And we were going to go splitsies, and he never ponied up. So I ended up paying the whole thing. But I still have some of this ash to this day. And it was one of those things because by sometime in there, I moved to Sonora. And
Sure.
so then I was like driving to Modesto, and then like, I don't know, I think I got one finished guitar out of that and a couple Blakes, and he kept some of them.
Sure.
But it was a very similar, it was like, it could have gone this route with us, except for, life and craziness. And, and he was never super interested in doing that. But that's so interesting that it was like a very similar path. And if he had my passion for it, or if I
Sure.
had been in that scenario, I could have ended up that way. But the next question I had was, the reason I was so drawn to the building of the guitars is because I felt like I could never find what I was looking for in guitars.
Sure.
Like the off the shelf guitars never really seemed to have the configurations, the pickup configurations. Like I feel like mainstream guitar manufacturing is like so like locked in to the basic stuff. You have the Strats, and you have the Telecasters, and you have the Les Pauls, and you have PRSs, which are a little different, and there's different things. It's like I kept saying, like, I want like, that's how I got into modding. It's like I want my own switching things, and so like, is that something that has pushed you, or is it more about just like making stuff and making the next thing, or what has kind of driven you along this path?
It's some of it. It's that. I mean, I kind of, I grew up playing Strats, and so I was always content in that world. But I really liked sonically Les Pauls. I just never liked playing them all that much. And like, it is that thing, right? To like in the car analogy, you find a brand that fits you the way you want, you like it. That's great.
Right. Sure.
And then there's this camp of people who like throw shade at Lamborghini, right? Or Ferrari because it's expensive and it's ridiculous and it's not functionally a car any better than a Toyota Camry is functionally a car in terms of turn the key, drive to work, drive home. Mm-hmm. Both of those will do that thing. But one is very much utilitarian, purpose bland, functional, and one is art and ridiculous for sake of ridiculousness and fun. And that's kind of the part that appealed to me. And like, so for me, what drives most of our stuff forward is not so much that I couldn't find something that didn't exist that I liked. I could find plenty of things that existed that I liked and would work totally fine for me. What I couldn't
Mm-hmm.
find was something that I couldn't find seven other dudes playing at the local jam, right? Like I wanted to build something that's kind of unique. Doesn't necessarily have to be, because I think there's a fine line again of like, there's unique and weird, and there's unique and like a way that, appeals to me personally. Like I didn't want to just be
Right.
weird for weird's sake. I wanted to build something that maybe could have existed in an alternate universe or whatever, or just made me happy. And like Daylighter, the original guitar design, the one that I kind of fell into what started the business, was essentially a carved top Jazzmaster Les Paul. It was a Les Paul scale, spec, pickup layout, that whole thing, 3-on-3
Mm-hmm.
headstock, carved top, mahogany maple combo, but in Jazzmaster shape, which I always loved. I thought Jazzmaster shape is one of the best shapes ever designed. And if Leo Fender had just gotten rid of all the Jazzmaster stuff and just basically made it the Strat, that would be the guitar we'd all be playing these days. Like it's such a ergonomically perfect design,
Yeah.
ruined with everything they put on it, trying to make it better, right? Like, what a guy who built radios, and didn't play guitar thought was the next way up from, I don't know, it's
Yeah.
Godfather 2. It doesn't, it's cool, but it doesn't, it's, you went one step too far there. And so it was kind of that original thing, was that hybrid of like, and without sounding arrogant, like me and Dennis Fano, like we were the guys pushing that offset kind of, thing. But yeah, so I just kind of designed this hybrid thing, and then, it just kind of went from there. And for me, like, I just want to build, I mean, I don't know, this is kind of a cliche now because other people have kind of moved into this space so much, but like that thing that could have existed 50 years ago that didn't. I mean, when I went through high school and stuff, I was the only guy I knew who was into Eric Clapton and blues and jazz, and like I always felt like I was kind of out of my era in terms of my taste and styles and stuff. And I think maybe that kind of shows
Mm-hmm.
through with the guitars that I design and build. And
Yeah.
it's neat because then in the industry, in my scale of the industry, the boutique side, there is such a huge gamut of styles and purposes and designs. And so I have my little niche, and I really enjoy everybody else's little
Yeah.
niche, and it works out really well.
Yeah, I have your website pulled up on my computer here, and so I feel like I'm looking, and you have like, okay, you have like something that's like definitely Strat inspired, and you have a couple things that are definitely Gibson inspired,
Sure.
but I don't know, like your body shapes are way different. And I was at your shop, and so the colors that you're offering are way different. They're definitely blinging. Like, yeah, you
Yeah.
just like, you're doing your own thing. It's super cool. And I know that you offer like some different pickup combinations that I'm not seeing at other places. And I just think it's like really, it's really awesome. And especially like if you're going the normal, like Fender, Gibson, route, like having those different pickup, options, having different body shapes. I just think that's a really cool, different thing.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
So, yeah.
It's, just trying to find a little niche that works for us and make what makes me happy.
Yeah. Great. And I just wanted to make a little bit of a clarification because, we've tossed around some car, analogies just so that people can follow us. But we've thrown out Ferrari, but, like we're talking guitars here,
Yeah.
like I'm just, I think these are list prices, we're not talking, like $250,000, which is like a Ferrari is, these are $3,800, $3,500, which is, that's a lot of money, but it's, that's on par. That's like less than like a Gibson Les Paul, like
at least a comparable version. Yeah. I always actually liken ourselves more. Okay. So I'm actually in my other hobbies. I'm a Volvo fanatic, and I've owned a ton of Volvos over the years, and what I've always loved about them is they're as ubiquitous in people's minds as they are as like the yuppie, whatever, which to be honest, I think Subaru's taken over that niche. But like what I was specifically into is the 80s turboed Volvos, which were like,
Okay.
they're faster than you expect them to be, but they were this fun thing of like, they're just different. They weren't a Mustang, they weren't a Camaro, they weren't a Firebird, they weren't a 911. They were rear wheel drive utilitarian vehicles that you could shoehorn big turbos and V8s, whatever you want. Like the world, there's so many things you could do with that platform. And that's kind of how I always looked at myself. Like, I'm like, I want to build the thing that is really neat and maybe not as expected. And within, yeah, I don't have Ferrari money. I wish I did. I have hot rod Volvo money, and that's kind of what the guitars are.
Nice. I like that. I like that analogy. You got hot rod Volvo money.
Yeah.
Nice. You've been making guitars now. What'd you say it was, like 15 years?
Yeah.
Okay, so you've been making guitars in the music industry, in my space, in the music industry space. What misconceptions have you encountered? Have you come up across when you tell people you make guitars, if you've never met them before? What do they say? Oh, really? Is that like blank? What misconceptions have you?
I think you have the two ends of it. I think a lot of people assume, you have probably the best experience of this, right? People find out I build guitars and they just assume, okay, you got some guy in his garage, and then they walk into the shop and see a 6,000 square foot shop with a bunch of, computerized equipment and people working there. And then, so that's always a surprise. And then I think the other end of it is like, they think I own this huge factory and, or whatever. Sure. I think most people I run into think it's neat. I don't think they realize how much work goes into it. That, I think we're kind of living through that era of the mass-produced, prepackaged, disposable product, and guitars are not. I mean, they can be that, but they aren't disposable necessarily, and it's a ton of work. It's a ton of work that goes into building those things, and it's a ton of work that I don't think people truly appreciate. How you can put 3 months of labor into something, 30, 40, 50 hours of hands-on work, and screw it up in a half a second right at the end.
Oh, yes. Oh, my gosh. Yeah. So if you don't think that building guitar is a lot of work, like, buy a guitar kit. Okay. Buy a really good, expensive kit. Like, spend like $400 on a guitar kit. Like, get a really good kit and spend a lot of time making it really good.
Yeah.
And it'll probably still play like garbage unless you have like a guitar tech set it up, because it's so hard to make a great guitar. Sure. It's so hard to make a really, really good guitar. Even if you start with a really high quality, heck, go buy a Warmoth, like body and neck that are already made, and like bolt all the parts on. If you don't know what you're doing to get that thing set up right, even if you do, I mean, dude, like making guitars is hard, man. Tough. It's hard.
Like just paint, for example, right? Like I'm always that guy because I primarily paint. That is the end of the section of the business that I seem to be kind of perpetually stuck in, and I really enjoy doing it. But like, there's a body shop behind me, and like I watch these guys, and you paint a car, you paint a quarter panel, you get a speck of dust in it, you get a speck of dust in it. No one cares, no one can see it, right? Or I'm driving behind I don't know, some new car, and I'm looking at how much orange peel's in the tailgate, and I'm like, they don't care or whatever. But on the guitar, everything is so micro in scale and pronounced that like that stuff is much more of an issue, and it's like it becomes that thing too of like. I look at, I have a Taylor guitars, like a 1 series, right? They're $900 or $1,100. I think it's a 110, or maybe it's a 2. I can't remember. It might be the 2. It's like the lowest priced American made, offering. And it is exceptional. Like there's not a file mark on a fret. The finish is fantastic. Like it's at a level that I struggle to match. And so sometimes I have to remind people, I'm like, I kind of got into this with somebody, not negatively, but I had to remind a newer place we do business with. I'm like, I might be pretty advanced for somebody at my scale. I don't have $1 million to throw at my spray booth or I don't have the wood library
Sure.
of 30 years of purchasing this kind of material, quilt or whatever. I got to make do with the resources I have. And so sometimes I have to remind people there's a little bit of a sliding scale of like, you might be able to buy a $1,500 American made guitar that has a couple details that are a little tighter or a little bit better than our couple little details that, or maybe a little bit of the more handmade part shows through. But where I will concentrate my efforts is to make it the best sounding, best playing, best looking as much as I can, all the things that make
Yeah.
it functionally the best guitar. And sometimes you got to weigh those two things. Because like my 2
Yeah.
Series Taylor is amazing. It's an unbelievable guitar for the money. It can play a little better. And I may or may not have put it in my Plec to make it play a little better. But that's also, we're talking,
Yeah.
it's a third the cost of the average guitar that I make, so it's
Mhm.
it's one of those things
Yeah.
that they've made their calculation a little different than I've made it. So I've tried to put my effort into, and dealing with the misconceptions sometimes about that. Like, I'm like, no, I'm just trying to, all I can do is make whatever I did on this one, apply what I learned from that to the next one, or my employees hopefully will continue to also do that trend line of like, okay, this one could be a little better here next time, and just keep trying to
Nice.
make it incrementally a little better every time. And it's, we look at
Yeah.
guitars, because we do the free plec on any cower of any vintage. And so like, we'll see stuff that comes back, from before the plec, which is now about 4 years old and older. Right. Man, that's a big jump in this detail that we've been chasing, or a big jump here. And yeah.
No, that's great, and I want to talk more about the Plek. And I want to wait for that for just a little bit. But yeah, you're dead right on the quality of the finish, and this to me is what I really see the difference on the budget foreign made guitars, right? So because you can get some like pretty dope foreign made guitars for like $500, $600.
The quality of that segment, like the kind of what I would call medium to upper tier import guitar, has come light years in the last 10 to 15 years. Like, it's
Oh, it's
amazing how much better they've gotten.
yeah. I got this dope. It's like a Mossrite kind of thing, like with P90s, and it's like a baritone, and it's got this sparkle finish, and it was on. It was
Ah,
on like
man.
a. It was on like a what do you call it? Black Friday sale, so it
Sure.
was like discounted, and and it showed up, and I was like, man, this thing is cool, and it was borderline unplayable. Like the frets were sprouted, and the finish was awful. Like I can't believe they let this thing like the clear was great.
Yeah.
The clear over it was perfect, and the imperfections underneath it. So just like what you're saying about the finish, like you're sitting 12 inches away from this thing every time you touch it. Every time you
Hmm.
pick it up, you're looking down at it, you're touching it. If there's imperfections, you see it, you
Yeah.
notice it.
Yeah.
It'll bother you if that thing's bothering you. Sometimes it doesn't. But I would much prefer. I don't mind dings, bings, bangs, scratches in my guitar if they happen naturally.
Yeah.
I've never ever. This comes from some of my guitar mentors. They always said it's all character,
Sure.
right? It's like look at guitars from the '60s; they're not pristine, and the ones that are banged up are the ones people go, "Oh, that's cool." So I've never minded anything, even if a brand new guitar, you scratch it, people go, "Oh, scratch! Take your belt off if you can play." I'm like, I don't care, but I'd rather they happened after I get it and not before I get it. So yeah, you put all that care into your finishes, and it really shows.
And that's where it's tough, because like, you hit a spot with the buffer an edge a second too long and burn the finish off. You drop a
Yeah.
screwdriver at the end. You get a little water during the wet sanding, and the swelling doesn't go. We had one that went out, and it kind of, the bolt. Sometimes the bolt-ons are a little tricky, like the finish around the neck, because it's got to come up to an edge that's raw, and that tends to be a weak spot anytime it's a raw edge. Up against paint, like it chipped a little bit. We don't know if it left that way or if it maybe something happened in shipping. And so it came back, we pulled it out of the bag, and like it got hit hard in shipping today. Like today we pulled it out and like,
Oh.
cool. So now it's really gonna need like and thankfully it's black, so it'll be one of the easier, yeah, and so it's tough. You put your heart and soul into these things, and you just want it to survive, get all the way to the end, get paid, make it to the customer, and the customer be happy with it. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, we'll fix it. Yeah, it happens.
Well, that kind of leads into the next question, which is you've been doing this for 15 years. What are some of the biggest challenges that you have faced and overcome? Or if you want to share, maybe do you have a notable like bad experience that maybe without naming names you could share with us?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's like any business in a lot of regards. Cash flow is our number one issue always. We
Sure.
were, the
Got
pandemic.
to keep the bills paid.
Yeah, the pandemic was as horrible as it sounds, was turned out to be great for business. We weathered through that. We were almost like, there's a slight thing where it's like, if we're extremely busy or we have absolutely zero work, it's the same stress level for me. Like it's either desperately trying to keep up
Oh
and make
wow.
sure that we're keeping orders going out the door on time and, dealing with all that, or desperately trying to figure out where the next dollar is coming in. And like that stress, it's the same amount of stress. Somewhere in the middle is kind of where it's really nice, but like it's tough. You
That's the sweet spot.
yeah, I want to be busy enough that I don't have to worry about if I decide tomorrow to fix this thing that needs fixing in the shop instead of getting another guitar that can be built on tomorrow done. It won't affect me. I can't, I mean, within reason. Obviously, I can't do it for a month, but I needed, and so when we were super slammed, like these problems that started uncovering in terms of like that level of demand and volume and sudden influx of orders, like that uncovered a whole bunch of problems that we were having in the shop, but we didn't have time to stop and deal with that.
Yeah.
And then it swung so fast the other way when gas kind of went through the roof. All of a sudden, it just came to a stop for us. Like then you're scrambling
Oh
to try
yeah,
to
I
pay
remember that.
bills. Oh man, it instantly turned it off for us. And so then we're scrambling just to,
I was commuting, basically 100 miles a day during when that gas went up to over $6 a gallon. So I
yep.
was feeling it. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and it's we're a disposable income product. You do not need one of our guitars to live. Like it's so when the disposable income goes away, boy, we feel it fast. And so
Yeah.
it has both sides of that. And then like sometimes you have people you have great relationships with, but as soon as it slows down for them too, suddenly you, there's warning signs I've seen with some customers or stores where suddenly, they're slow to pay bills, and then when they used to be solid, or and then they start looking for what I would call imaginary problems, and I'm like, or other things, and then and sometimes you
Mm.
get customers that suddenly they're like, oh, you get the thing done, and then they don't really. What I think always boils down to is they don't actually have the money when it's done, and they start looking for some reason to get out of it, and so that's tough.
Mm.
We've had very luckily on this side of it, it was kind of this thing. We get a lot of people. We don't really advertise what or where the shop is in some regards. I keep kind of a low profile because I don't necessarily want theft. So it doesn't say guitars on the door. Like it just says Tower Products
Right.
Group. And so we get UPS drivers or whatever. Somebody comes in for the first time, and it's always the same story, right? Like, oh man, if you just had so and so play, somebody famous play your stuff, you'd be made. And I'm like. And then I just rattle through the list of incredibly huge artists who play our guitars on tour worldwide all the time. And I'm like, still have $80 in the bank account right now, man. Like it doesn't work that way as much as you think it does. Sometimes there's 20 grand, sometimes you're in the hole, and sometimes those are only
Yeah.
24 hours apart, or not even that
Yeah.
sometimes, and so
Yeah.
that part's a challenge. It's tough. That's the biggest single thing that we struggle with, because like anybody else, because money unlocks solutions to some problems, not all of them, but it does help with some issues. And then just after that and it's related to money, of course, but it's people. It takes so long to train anyone, no matter how good they might come in, and to be honest, we can't afford the people who would be, I would say, truly gifted at it. We're trying to strike that balance too. And I have amazing people who work for me, but it does take like, Josh, who's in paint with me, who we kind of hired part-time to fill a gap somewhere else in the shop. And then we had an employee leave that was doing paint with me at the time. And like, just at the point where they were so self-contained that I was thinking, man, I can step away from this process completely and then hire someone new to start training under that person. And then that person bounced. And so we brought Josh in, and he's been doing it with me it'll be coming up on a year. Literally, I think he started in January. And he's just about to that point where I don't, like, he's beyond the point of me having to micromanage. And he's mostly at the point where I never really have to show him anything anymore. Today we had a Banshee that's kind of a combo we haven't done before. And there's a spot that I think he thought wouldn't be visible, but is on this particular combo. So it's like, next time we do it, now does this area needs to be sanded just a little bit more. And it's too late now, but it looks fine. We can just make it a little bit better next time. But like, that's the hardest part. That beyond anything else is just because at some point you gotta be willing to break eggs, and you gotta turn them loose on something that's gonna be a guitar you're kind of counting on getting paid on, and sometimes you get to start over. Sometimes they do it, and sometimes doesn't work out, and I'm not immune to it either. I lost the neck on the buffer. I haven't tossed something on the buffer in a long time, and I did it 2 weeks ago. Thankfully it was just a Corona neck, and we make those kind of in bulk, so it wasn't end of the world. It was like, yeah, well, that was a waste of time.
No, Doug. Yeah. Doug, this is not a waste of time. This is a learning opportunity. This is a teaching. That's what I'm saying. This isn't a waste. This is a teaching opportunity. You get to go pull you guys around. See, guys, look, this is what we have to look out for. This is why we hold those necks so tight.
Yep. Oh man, mine was that you can't go on a ridiculous group bike ride in 100-degree heat, be dehydrated for 3 days afterwards, and then try to get that one more thing done that you should have just walked away. That was the lesson. Just walked away, save it for the next day.
Oh man. Yeah, I can't imagine how hot your shop is in this heat. Oh my goodness.
The guys are kind of soft. No. Andrew, who's been, I think you might have met, he's my OG guy. He's been with me since like at least 10 years now. He's the only remaining like original dude. He and I remember what the shop was like before it had HVAC in the shop. Like the offices always did, but this time of year, but I think we got air conditioning about 5 years ago.
Okay, good.
Yeah, and it works well. Don't get me wrong, but like before we got air conditioning in there on a day like today where it's 110 outside. We would come in at 6 a.m. and leave by 10 a.m. because it would be so hot. You couldn't couldn't glue anything. You couldn't spray finish. You couldn't do anything. Now we can kind of keep the shop. Now the rule is when it's this hot, you have till noon or 1 o'clock to do everything that requires the dust collector because it heats the shop really badly. And then that's it. And then the air conditioning will kind of keep it tolerable till about 3 or 4. But you have to. You're not allowed to use the dust collector or any heavy equipment past noon at that point.
Okay, you talked about the challenges and some of the difficult things. So why do you do this? What fills your bucket? What keeps you going?
I had a friend ask me kind of a similar version of that the other day. Like one of my kids' friends' parents, like we don't see that, we're kind of just getting to know. And it's funny. My answer was like, I kind of had the realization that every time we talk about, especially Andrew and I, like when the lottery gets to be ridiculous, the things we do with the money, my first 10 answers are the shop. Like, it's not like, I buy a house in Carmel and you never see me again. That's like number 11.
Right.
But like, it's always the first.
That also happens.
Yeah, it will happen. But
don't get me wrong. I'm still doing the house in Carmel.
Yeah. It's pay off these bills first and then pay off all of our houses. And then item number 3, this piece of equipment in the shop, or honestly buy the complex. And then, and the realization I came to is I would do this for free if I didn't have to depend on the money. Like if people would work for free and, I would do it for free because I love doing it. I really do love building guitars. Yeah. As frustrating as it can be from time to time. And weirdly frustrating, like besides the money end of it and stuff. Sometimes you have a thing that you do over and over again and it works great. And then one day it doesn't and you don't know, did this thing change at the manufacturer level? This product I use, is it temperature? And then you'll pull your hair out for a while and then kind of figure it out and then move on to the next thing. And then you'll finally feel like you're doing, I got it all worked out. And sometimes it's even on the same, like again, because I'm in finishing, like I'll stand a guitar to go to buff a certain way. I'm like, wow, that one went really good. I'm going to do the next one the same way. I think I got this figured out. And the next one fights you the whole time. I'm like, what the hell? What's different? These are, so it's that part, it's,
That's
but
crazy.
I enjoy the creativity of it. We don't build, same thing, like when you talk about Fender and Gibson, right? Like, or my Taylor, they're putting out 400 of the same thing every day or whatever it is. We might
Right.
in a year do what I would say maybe 10 of the same thing sometimes. And that's really only if one specific retailer orders, because they do order specific items to cover multiple stores. And even then, like we're finishing a run for Guitar Center right now of 6 guitars. So that's the most, not the most, we've done a lot more with them, but like that's the first time in a while we have a batch of the same thing. But, if you go in the office
Yeah.
from everything from the last 2 weeks in there was 30 guitars and not one was the same guitar. Same, family, but different finishes, different options, different pickups. So I get to have kind of this creative release in a way that kind of like building cars was for me, but on a much more attainable weekly, daily scale in terms of like, I get to go build a new guitar that is something I want to build. And I don't have to have 3 years of my life invested in that thing and, untold amount of money. Tomorrow I'll build a different one. And like and then sometimes the guys in the shop will have an idea, that I'm like, yeah, let's do that. Let's make that thing. Or Diego, not our newest, he's been with me about a year and a half. He's one of our newer guys who kind of took over the digital end of it in terms of like CNC programming and he's much smarter than I am. Like he's got the knowledge set to move beyond what I was able to accomplish. And so he's been implementing things and it took him a while to kind of unpack why why I've designed things a certain way or programmed things a certain way. And now he's moving beyond that. And that's really exciting to me to see what, he's going to do next in terms of how to make the machine work better. Or, boy, I've always wanted to make this thing, but I don't quite know how to do it. And then, that is my favorite part of the process is that 2 a.m. idea where like, oh shit, I know how to do this now. Or, oh, I know how to make this tool. And like, so he's been a great resource because he's also like, he's got a 3D printer. And I'm like, I know what I want conceptually, but I don't know how to get us from here to there. And he does. And so it like, we made these really
awesome.
simple, like ground wire drilling jigs because it's like, you got to use a tiny drill bit that's like 12 inches long and hit a point.
Yeah.
It's like it's like a NASA analogy where you're like trying to hit an orbiting thing,
Mm-hmm.
and every once in a while
I drilled through my Telecaster.
Yep.
I drilled right through the back of my Telecaster when I tried to do that.
Yeah. So. Every once in a while it would happen. And like I told Diego, I'm like, man, I just really need this thing. And I sketched it. And he's like, oh yeah, I can do that. And then he 3D printed this jig with a drill guide that's exactly the right angle and then fits in the cavity a certain way. And then all my buddies, Frank Brothers and all these other guys saw that like, oh, can you make us those? And I'm like, I can't, but I'll give you Diego's email address. He can. So I love that's that amazing. Part of it. And so that's the thing. I just kind of always get to come back to, as much as the day-to-day can be rough from the business end of it, I do love making guitars. I really enjoy it, and I really enjoy the creativity of it. And I get to do, again, like with the artist stuff, I have had unbelievable opportunities that I should not have. Like we are in Sacramento, and we're not at the big music stop. We're not Nashville. We're not Hollywood or LA or New York City, and so like the amount of people who play our stuff is ridiculous. And so I get to hang out with, we just did Rival Sons, and they're touring with Pumpkins and Stone Temple Pilots. And, we got to hang out backstage with Scott. We ended up meeting, a bunch of the guys from Stone Temple Pilots, who's my wife's, like one of her top bands. So she's losing her mind. No big deal. Yeah. And I was just like, it's just a Saturday, Friday night for whatever, Yeah. Keeps my marriage in good condition for a while.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay, so do you have something you might consider the Doug Cower or the Cower Guitars signature move?
Signature move. Okay. Well, I definitely have a design sense that's kind of our signature. I think the signature moves for me, personality wise, might be more in terms of how do I put this? Well, okay, there's the running thing with all the Simpsons references over the years, and that was kind of a thing that I think was more perception than reality. Like I think I made a couple Simpsons jokes. I love the Simpsons, but like it wasn't like a thing. And then it just kind of snowballed into being like the license plate on my car is Mr. Globex, and like we did the Moo Moo guitar and the Mr. Sparkles guitar and stuff like that. I enjoyed that for a long time. Our signature move was I shouldn't say we I would ruthlessly troll back trolls on our Instagram account. Like I just have zero patience for it, and I would make it a sporting pastime for me. And for a long time, I would have like, man, people would come up to be like, "Oh man, I love your guitars, but I love how you handle trolls more." And like, so I don't know. That might be. We had one guy who he was so ridiculous and such a I'll keep it PG. It got a little out of control on us just relentlessly making fun of this guy and everybody kind of dogpiling on him because he was really being a genuine ass. And like by the end of it, I had turned him into a coupon code for the website as like I was like, oh, I feel like we took this too far, and so get 15% off. And I used his name.
Oh my goodness!
It was really pretty solid. It was one of my more favorite moments.
Oh man, that's awesome.
We're having this discussion with we do that line of guitar racks. It's also it's kind of what helps fills out the between guitar sales and stuff, and it's a great product line. But like we're working with this marketing company because we're trying to get it a little bit more thing, and I don't have any more bandwidth to dedicate to it. And we were talking about that. They're like, well, they're starting to see that, Facebook level, just, I could make this thing for $40. Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, this is why I'm hiring you guys because I can't put up with this anymore. I'm not passionate enough about this, and it's too much of a generic product for me to do that, to have the trollback response on. But if you guys want me to, I will. I'm like, nah, you probably shouldn't do that. I'm like, that's probably the right call. Like we'll be professional about this. The guitar side, not so much.
That's awesome. I wanted to. I think this is a good time to maybe talk about the Plek machine, because
Sure.
You said about 4 years ago you got the Plek machine, and now all your guitars are getting plecked. And you mentioned that if someone has an older cower, that they can get them plecked from you. Sure. How has the Plek machine changed your process? How has the Plek machine changed? What you guys are doing, and for those of you, everyone that is listening right now and is saying, what word is he saying?
What is a Plek?
It is Plek, Plek, and it is basically it's like a computer assisted. It's a CNC for guitar setups. It is the most amazing invention ever made. If you're me, which is a guitar tech, it's so cool, guys. What it can do. I'll let you explain it because you deal with it every day. Why don't you explain what it is and maybe how it's changed what you guys do?
If you don't play guitar, or if you tangentially don't know what a Plek does, the most important part of how a guitar plays is what's called the fretboard and fretwork. So that's the surface that the strings actually push against, and those are the little metal pieces that the strings, that forms the note. And that is not it's a very simple looking thing, but it's actually a complex set of geometries. You've got essentially what is a cone. And not only is that cone, it's got its own dimension that way, but it's being pulled by strings and, somewhere in the range of 100 to 200 pounds, depending on what you're making.
Yep.
So it's under tension and it moves a certain way under tension. So a Plek machine, and it's a German machine, and it's very German. And I say this, Cowrie is a German last name, so I'm gonna shade on my own people here. Only the Germans could be this anal. Like no one else would like. It's such a like. All my other heavy equipment is Italian. That for some reason, it's like that's the whole thing for woodworking is Italian CNC machines and stuff. And like, but this is a very German thing. Like so what it does and what we do with it. And we bought it with one intention in mind, and then have kind of grown with seeing what we could do with it. Was you would basically take a guitar under string tension, and then it comes in and uses a scanning probe to scan that surface across the frets and fretboard at each string all the way up the neck and map the whole thing out digitally. And then you can see exactly what each fret at each string at each position under tension is doing. And then you can apply a cut value down to about 3,000th of a millimeter for how much you need to remove from the top of those frets to make it perfect everywhere. And the way you would do that without the plec is you would use like some sort of aluminum or some sort of metal bar. You put sandpaper on it. You take a Sharpie and you mark the top of each fret, and then you drag that over the top of each fret until there's no Sharpie left. Or there's some differing trains of thoughts.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is what I do as a guitar tech, guys. This is what I do. Yes.
Yep. And then you come back with a crowning file, and then you turn that thing round again because it's not flat. You want it to be round, so it's this sharp point essentially at the micro level. Anyway, the problem with that, now we had a really stellar reputation for doing excellent, what I call hand fretwork, so pre-plec. But the problem ultimately was scaling was we had one guy doing all of that. And then when we would try to have two people doing that to keep up, you had two different quality levels. Yeah. And that's unacceptable. And to be honest, doing just that step all day, every day,
miserable.
You might have you either quit or you kill yourself. Yeah. Like it's just awful. It's hard on you.
Yeah.
It's difficult. And so there's lots of different approaches to how to minimize that work or deal with it. But the plec is what we really wanted to do with that. And so what we bought it for was to just cut the top of those frets and do our nut slotting so that those two steps are, no matter which person puts the guitar together, me, Logan, other guys we had at the time, it's always, that part is always the same. And that is that, again, that fundamental, like, you might argue about if a dust speck in the finish is an issue or not, but I know fundamentally that guitar is the best it will ever play. Like, it cannot be improved beyond this point, or at least within what I can, what I think is feasible. So what's neat about the plec though, is it does do more things, and we've started expanding into, we started with just doing fret cutting and nut slotting. And I was like, well, what if we slot the fretboards on this one model where we can't do it like we do everything else, but I want to achieve the same goal? Okay, so we started doing that. And then it was like, well, what if we start using it to do, like when we make a neck and a fretboard, so a fretboard's actually got a curve to it, it's like a radius across the top, it's not flat. We would mill that curve in on the CNC, but then we put the inlays in it, because if we try to put the inlays in before on the CNC, about half the time it would yank them out. So we'd have to come in and kind of re-level that off with a radius sanding beam. And then we'd realize we just kind of undid everything the CNC did well. And we just introduced a bunch of human drift back into it. So then we started having the plec do that. And then it's just become this thing of like, now what I've been doing with it is we do what I'm calling compound relief neck. So if you look at, again, with a guitar, it's got 6 strings to average. 3 of them are what called wound strings. Those are your lower notes. You got 3 strings that are your higher unwound strings. Those are your higher notes, in terms of tuning. But they get progressively smaller in gauge or, diameter of the string as you go to that side. And that makes it high, they're under higher tension and higher pitch, whatever. Okay. The higher pitch ones, when you strike it, all the strings do this. They move in a very small eccentric orbit, an elliptical orbit. But the wound strings, they move in a much bigger elliptical orbit because of their lower frequency. So now this thing we're trying to do is like, okay, well, and it kind of started with the idea that, to be honest, I was playing a guitar that predates the plec, and I was like, where our work wasn't quite as consistent. And, I was like, man, this thing plays, because also the problem is that neck moves seasonally. So it was like coming right into the time of year where you would have to make a small adjustment on the neck. And like, it was really flat on the treble side, but it had a little bit of relief because we probably sanded it in by accident, to be honest, or maybe even a little twist in the neck. But I think it's more sanding related. It had a little bit more relief on the bass side. And so it still played and sounded really good without buzzing quite yet.
That's like, so crazy.
Can I duplicate this with the plec? And so now we intentionally do this where when we do the fretboard surface before the frets go in, one side is flat, and then it gets progressively more dipped in the middle, essentially. And we're not talking much. We're like 4, 5, 6 thousandths of an inch, like very, very small amount,
Yeah.
But we can also, then we fret it. But the only way this whole thing works is because we control both sides of the fret process,
Right.
below the fret and above the fret.
Yep.
We can mimic that curve across the baseline fretwork also, so that we don't accidentally take it out. Like if we did it by hand, you could not mimic this by hand. It would be
Right.
impossible. And even then, we're taking such a small cut. One pass with the sanding block, with a traditional way of doing it, would take more material than we're taking with the Plex. So it's amazing. Like,
Yeah.
and the reason when we do this service for free, at least in terms of plecking, any cower at this point, is because guitars are analog things. I always think of the Plek now as this. It's the only free, essentially, software update I can do. It's the one thing
Sure.
I can do that can drastically sometimes improve how that guitar plays. And I want to do it. I'm happy to do it, and selfishly, for me, what it also does is, because we scan this thing digitally, I now have a record of,
Yeah.
everything we put in there. So when I put a 15-year-old cower in there, and a 10-year-old cower, and a 5-year-old cower, and a cower that's been around the world, I can see now exactly in digital format
Yep.
what that neck has done,
Yes.
where it's moved, what the quality of our fret surface was back then.
Mm-hmm.
And then if it comes in 3 years from now, I can bring that thing up and go, oh, it's either moved or it hasn't, or it's twisted or it hasn't, or
Yeah.
and have that fundamental data to then apply towards how we do all our processes up to that point, if they need to change. So it's amazing. Like, I think where the Plek gets kind of a bad reputation is, you're at the mercy of what you have to work with, in terms of, like, when you bring in a personal guitar, right? Something
Mm-hmm.
that was made, whatever. If the fretboard surface is bad and you're not willing to pull the frets and fix it, you can only fix so much,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or, and so I think there's some people that are like, oh, I had this thing plecked and it didn't really make that big a difference. And like, sometimes on my like, I plecked all my stuff that is mine that predates the Plek, and some of them improved a lot, and some of them really were pretty damn close from the get go. Like
Nice.
they could improve a little bit, but it wasn't fundamentally like a huge jump, and
Yeah.
so, but it's an amazing machine. Like it
Yeah.
just boggles the mind, and there's such a great company to work with. And like, I've suggested, like, it takes sometimes a long time, but I've made suggestions 3 or 4 years ago when we first got it, and I was like, hey, boy, it'd be really cool if you could make this thing that I'm pretty sure you already kind of have there do this other thing too. And now we're starting to see those things hit. So
That's awesome.
they've been a great company. This is all they do. So that
Sure.
they're really passionate about, squeezing as much out of these things for people as they can.
Yeah. And you're a relatively new guitar company. You don't have, for example, Fender's like 70 or 80 years of history to look back at. You don't have a 52 Tele that you can look back and say, well, I know how these things have changed over time. I know what my instruments are going to do. To have that and be able to get your guitars back, guitars you've made 15 years ago, 12 years ago, 10 years ago, and you say, hey, if you send your guitars to me, I'll do this. Well, it's a good way to see how your work has been lasting, to see if there's something maybe that you can learn from the work you've done in the past and maybe apply to your current work. That's really an invaluable tool. And like you said, to catalog those changes moving forward. Do you have something that you might consider like your favorite moment as you've been doing this? Like maybe like I don't know, like maybe like your all-time favorite musician is like you've seen him on stage with like a cower, or I don't know. I don't want to speak for you, but like something where it was like
Oh, I have a few.
Oh, tell me.
I have. Okay, I'll give you my. I'll do a few of these.
Okay.
The most surreal one I have was Walter Becker from Steely Dan had a handful of our guitars,
Nice.
and it sounds like a big deal. It is a big deal, but Walter was a just genuine gear freak. So he had a literal metric ton of guitars. So it's a nice compliment, but like, it's not like, I have to put a little bit of the caveat. But anyway, he was an unbelievably sweet guy, and his main dude, Night Bob, who was his tech and buddy, guitar, he's just one of these super connected guys. Night Bob goes back to Aerosmith and everything, right? So the most surreal moment I had is I think the last time I got to see those guys and hang out. I got to drag my wife and my dad along, and so we're sitting, backstage with Walter, my dad, my wife, and I shooting the shit about guitars, whatever. And I look over, and my dad is like my dad's 63. He is the demographic for Steely Dan. Like he was a white guy in the 70s, and I am too. I mean, I love him too, but like he's losing his mind. Like, he's being cool about it, but I know he's just losing his mind about sitting in this room. And it was that thing of like this surreal thing of like, I took AutoCAD to get out of math and I'm here now. Like it's that like you started this cabinet business because you started making shit in the garage for friends and then, went full time. And I grew up in that shop. I mean, there's photos of me in the garage days when I was 5 years old, and there's photos of me in every version of the shop. And I owned, when he retired, I bought what I didn't already own. I've been buying for over the years. I bought the rest from him, and but like, yeah, you have that moment where I'm like, you're sitting here, and it was surreal for me too, because like every once in a while I have to remind myself that stay in boat, like like I try not to be starstruck, and I'm trying not to like be that guy that talks about but like that was a really surreal moment, and then I think my favorite, I think kind of the running like the mountain peak is still this one was Jimmy Vivino bought a Banshee or had ended up having a couple of guitars. So before NAMM, this is years ago now, when Conan was still in the air, we always go down to NAMM when we do the big display. I bring everybody down. We go down a couple days early, get it all set up, and then we have an extra day or two to do it, or Disneyland, whatever we feel like doing. So one year we got to work it out. We had to go do a Conan taping. We hung out with Jimmy, and we do a Roy over there. Or he was over there. He's at Capitol now. Really well. We get to do hang out, and meet all these guys, and do this whole thing. And I'm like Conan's like all time favorite people, comedian, everything for me. Yes, between The Simpsons and all late night and everything.
Yeah.
And like, so I'm trying to be cool, but at the same time, I'm like, man, what happens if we meet Conan? And then like we get through the whole thing, and we're just kind of hanging around after the taping's done. And we're kind of slowly working our way out, but we're still all shooting the shit. And then Conan came out and just ended up BSing with us about guitars for like 15 minutes.
Yeah, because he's a musician too. He plays guitar. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. And like, so that was for me. That was I know there should be other moments. We've been on Dick Clark New Year's Eve 3 times. I've been on all the late night shows with guitars. I've been on major tours. That was my best moment though. Like I was just trying to keep it bottled up and be cool as much as humanly possible. And
hanging out with Conan.
I mean, I made it through. Yeah. And, I made a great photo of all of us with him, and, and then we're leaving and we're walking back off the lot, and Conan drives out, and as he's driving by, it's so perfectly him. We just hear, like, we're not paying attention. We just, cars going by, and we just hear, "Sorry about Jimmy, you guys," and then he just drives off. And it was just, it was a very perfect moment. And
nice.
I don't want to do, a disservice to all the amazing people who play our stuff, because there's a lot of amazing moments, but that one's my favorite. Like that one hit. That's the street credit with my kids that, my kids, my oldest is really into comedy, and he's really obsessed with Conan and the podcast. And like he was watching Conan Without Borders the other night. So that's always the thing when I'm like, they get a little uppy. I'm like, I've met Conan. You're not that cool. I've met Conan. I don't want to hear about Fortnite. I've met Conan. Gotta keep them in their place a little bit.
Yeah, that's true. So if someone's sitting there and listening to this maybe, and they're thinking, you know what, I've built a guitar kit and I've got the bug and I just can't not do it. I must be the next person that starts their own business because I'm that kind of crazy and I must build guitars. What advice would you give to that person?
Well, okay, I'll start with rule number one. You marry somebody with a real job. That's step number one. Like, you got to do that first. Like,
Definitely
they need to
marrying
have a
someone
real
with a
job
real
and
job.
insurance. And every single person in this business is living on somebody with a real job. 100%. Nobody's doing it by themselves. Like, it's just impossible. Step number two is, if you really want to do this, there's two paths. And the one path that I recommend against always is I think a lot of people fall into this trap. Oh, I built three Telecasters and it's only $600 in parts. I can do these things for $1,500 and I'll make 1 million of them and I'll be rich. It doesn't work that way. It just does not. We did a brand called Titan Guitars, which is what our Corona came from, our Corona model.
Hmm.
And it was called the KR1 back then. And it was essentially we were an established company. This is not like 20 years ago. This is like 10 years, 8 years ago. We were able to leverage all the resources we had on hand and subcontract out a couple parts to help. And we attempted to do a guitar, and I knew it would be a failure for this reason, but we did it anyway for about $1,400, and it was phenomenal. And it went for about a year and a half, and then everybody who wanted one apparently bought one, and that was it. And I think the trap that you fall into is you have to charge enough to make this survivable. There's no way we could even do it now. Like, this is when you could still and like, it had Duncans, like, it had good parts. It was all American made, made in our shop. It was just very streamlined, limited finish, satin, that kind of thing. We kind of broke it down to be a very production friendly guitar, and we learned a lot from it. But if you think you're going to make a living at $1,500 a guitar, you better have $1 million advertising budget, because you're going to lose every time on name. You're going to lose to Fender and Gibson every time. We still lose to Fender and Gibson 80 to 90% of the time. Like, we just do. It's, even at our price point, which is now averaging about $4,000. If you got $4,000 to spend, it used to be you've already had all the Fenders and Gibsons and PRSs, and you want something nobody else has. And now we're kind of back into that, like, maybe we're not in that price range anymore. Right? We're still on boy, I'm buying my first good Les Paul at this point. So that's, the other side, and the other side of that is, it is easier to get started building Strats, Tellys, and Les Pauls. So no argument here. It only is a survivable thing until the next guy comes along and does it for a little bit less. And very few people, I think, long term survive making that. So it's easier in the short term, but it's much harder in the long term. If you want to get into this and you're dumb enough to have started and stubborn enough not to quit, you really need to be doing original work.
Yeah.
Or at least original enough. Like, you can make the argument we have 4 major models of guitars, and one of them is our version of a Gibson Firebird, and the other 3 are purely original designs. And, the Banshee is Firebird inspired. It's this version Gibson and I have an agreement on. The original version was closer to theirs. And it was a guitar that kind of I built for fun before I was doing this for a living, and I did not want to do when I started Tower Guitars. I did not want to make that thing, and then it became a thing. People knew I kind of had made them for fun, and then started having a reputation for having built the better version of that guitar, or at least the version you couldn't get anywhere else. And I started doing them, and it is still roughly half our sales, and I'm very proud of it. We really do make the best version of that guitar, because I'm not totally locked in on having to be this vintage correct thing. We can make our version of it. But Starliner, Corona, Electroliner, Super Chief are my designs, and they're the things I'm more proud of, essentially, a little bit. So sometimes you got to find that balance. And, like, the nice thing is, I don't feel bad for Banshee, because at least it's the best version of what is already kind of an obscure guitar. It's not just another Strat or a Tele. It's something that's it's like the same reason why we don't build acoustics. I get people ask me that all the time, like, oh, have you ever built an acoustic? I'm like, I do not know what I could bring to that to improve on anything. There are thousands of small builders, one-man shops that do it better than I ever could, and I could never hope to build all of my Taylors are exactly what I want them to be. Now, I would love to own a Santa Cruz or a Collins or a handful of other ones. And Richard Hoover I love that guy. He's so nice and kind to me, which makes no sense, because we're but he always goes out of his way. And Bob Taylor is a personal friend, like another guy who goes out of his way to see how I'm doing, and we chat from time to time. And I've been down to the factory a few times and spent time with Bob specifically and Richard, and at Santa Cruz. And like I don't know what to bring to that. And like being cheese, at least I feel like I could bring something to that, and so I don't feel as bad about making that. But yeah, you really should find something that authentically makes you happy, is a design that you authentically want to play, and then make that, and then make it for 15 years and then still be broke. You know,
Nice.
but keep your wife happy or spouse, because it will help.
Okay, so I have a segment on the show, and we can't do it every time, but I try I throw it out there for every guest if they have an idea, and it's called "Let's Get Into It," which is if there's a way that we can do a little bit of this topic on the show, like for example, when we had a guest that was a photographer, he showed us some of the hidden photography settings on our phone that no one knows about. We did improv games when we had an improv comedian on. I was wondering if you had any ideas of something we could do in just a couple minutes over the internet.
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. I will throw an alternative one out there.
I'm
though
down.
It probably won't help today. Are you coming down for Cowerfest?
When is that? I've never heard of this.
September 16th, next month.
Oh my gosh.
Oh man, I'm doing an excellent job marketing this, and I need to get back on this harder. It's on our website. I think we sent out some emails, and it's on our Instagram, or it will be back on there again. I need to put a new post on it.
I don't think I have anything planned.
Yeah. Cowerfest, September 16th. It's the first time we've done it since 2019. We took a year off.
Oh my gosh.
I'm sorry, since 2018. We took a year off in 2019, and then the world shut down. And it is our annual open house. We have taco truck coming, beer. We play music all day. It's kind of open jam. We build a bunch of guitars, typically kind of for Cowerfest. Everybody brings, it kind of started as a thing before the business was like, just bring cool shit. Well, it's like a Gear Fest day. And it's pretty Cower specific, but it's the one time a year that we'll bring a bunch of the loud amps from my personal collection, and we'll, bring interesting guitars, and then Cower customers bring stuff, and we play music all day. And yeah, we might have to make a compendium swipe 2-minute add-on podcast, but we could do something fun there.
I know that this is like something that you're probably open to like everyone, but I'm going to take this as a personal invitation for me to come to Cowerfest, and I'm gonna definitely make that happen. That'll be amazing. That's awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah, man. I'm looking forward to seeing you there. It's really fun. I mean, we're not running the equipment that day, but the shop's open, and it's a really fun day. It's been I think it's been 5 years. I'm very much missing it. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, maybe I'll shoot something, and we'll put it up on my guitar channel, and because that'll be in line for that'll be perfect for that channel. Okay, so that was awesome. Thank you for the invitation, great. And we'll make that's on September 16th. If you're in the Sacramento area,
please do.
Okay, so this is the important question of the whole show. N+1, and look, you are the dealer, okay, of N+1, which, as all guitar players know, how many guitars is enough guitars? And Doug Cower says one more. N+1, you always need one more. But for you, in your journey, Doug,
there's never enough.
In your journey, what is next? What is next on the horizon for you? What are you working on? What are you working towards? What are you dreaming about? What's next for you? I mean, obviously you just mentioned Cowerfest, but like, what's on the horizon for you?
I don't. Well, okay. So professionally, I'm not sure. I've been in a little bit of a creative rut design wise. I've been I like the models we have going right now. I like the designs. I don't have this burning, I do have a couple things I've been kind of messing with, but they're not there yet. I've been messing with a bass again. I think we have it kind of drawn, a bass version of Electroliner. And so that might be kind of cool. I don't know. In terms of new designs, I'm a little stuck there. I would like to get the business back into where, I think we're kind of hopefully coming through the end of what was been a kind of a slow 18 months or so. I'm kind of still focusing on that. So we're kind of pushing the rack line a lot harder right now because it's just such a great product and it's a little bit easier to, spin up quickly like that. I know what my next guitar is.
Oh, really? Tell me about this.
I think the next one will be, yeah, I actually was just talking to the guys last night. I have a Frank Brothers guitar. I love Nick and Tim. Those guys are just my favorite people. And they were asking me what inlays they're working on it right now, so that's exciting. I think I might see that at the end of this year. That'd be kind of cool. There's a Cole I've been waiting on from Saul for a long time, and it's fine. That's how trades go. I love Saul's work, so I don't really care. I'll wait.
Nice.
I'll wait 10 more years. I don't care. It's not like I have time
That's
to play these
amazing.
things anyway. So,
Who has time to
I'm not
play?
sure. I don't. I actually kind
Yeah.
of excited. My oldest, he's 10. He's turning 11 pretty soon. I made him. I made it years ago. I made this little. Essentially, I made two of them originally, and I made a few more for people. It was essentially one is an electric mandolin for my father-in-law, and then his I did tuned EADG, so you could just play power chords on it. And he's had it for I don't know since he was 5 or 6, and like just literally yesterday, he's like, "Hey, can you teach me something on this? I want to play
Nice.
Everybody wants to rule the world at the talent fair." And I'm like, "Well, when's the talent fair? Because you've never played this thing ever. We gotta have some ground to catch up." But that's been exciting. So I'm looking forward to that. That's
Nice.
something to look
That's so
forward to
cool.
here. And yeah, yeah, just I don't know. I just keep showing up, and sometimes things I get a lot of credit for good ideas were not my idea. They're customer suggestions, and sometimes that'll happen. And
Yeah.
sometimes I wake up and Super Chief was this way. That's part of the creative rut. Is like Super Chief is everything I've ever wanted to do with my name on it. Like it's all of it. And like that thing came about because I walked into the shop one morning a few years back and was like, I'm going to sit and draw this right now. I know exactly what I want it to be. And then in an hour, I had the prototypes kind of roughing on the machine. So like, I don't know. I'm open to be whatever happens.
Nice. Here's the thing that me and my buddy have been dreaming about, except for then he had my buddy Keenan. He was actually episode 2 of the show, guys. Go ahead and check it out. He was a kid that I mentored and we jammed a bunch, and then he went off to college and got his degree, and now he's like one of the smartest kids I know and an awesome musician. But he actually
Sure.
got his degree, and he's actually working at a machine shop now, and he's so he knows like CAD and all this stuff. And so we've kind of also bonded about over guitar building. And so he's trying to help me bring my vision to light. Except for now, then he's having his life going. He just got married. Congratulations, Keenan.
Sure.
But here's the thing that I've always wanted, which is like the perfect amalgamation between a Strat and a Telly, because you want the Telly in the bridge and a Strat and the neck in the
Yep.
middle. But they make a like, have you ever heard of the Maverick Super V tremolo?
Mm-hmm.
Check this thing out, because you actually get the Telly bridge plate, but it has a rail that has the tremolo for a Strat with brass barrel saddles. And every time I've ever seen one of those, it's still got a Telly layout. It never has a Strat layout.
Doesn't have sorry, the light's getting a little rough in here.
Yeah,
Can't quite see that. Sorry, not to cut you off.
Yeah,
I'll get. There we go. Yeah, so that's the Strat style trim with the Telly saddles on my Dymel, and then I know which one you're talking about. This is like the same thing that has the there it is, maybe a little bit better light.
So
this is amazing guitar, by the way. I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. So Maverick Super V, throw a Telly bridge pickup in there, Strat pickups in the neck and middle, make it offset with the switch up top, kind of like a Les Paul, 2 knobs. That's my recommendation with a big fat 50s neck. Make that, and then we're good.
Yep.
Anyway,
there you go.
So
I will amend my N+1 slightly. I will say my long-term goal here is to sort of disentangle myself from the business a little bit. I really want that place to function without me. Like, not that I don't want to
Yeah.
be there. I just, I need, that's kind of been my overarching goal for the last couple of years is like, okay, what process is only dependent on one person? And there's a couple spots. I'm one of them in a couple spots and one other guy. I'm like, that's my goal. Can't, because then
Nice.
like right now, literally I got a kid in quarantine as of this morning who my youngest woke up coughing, and then we
Oh,
COVID
bummer.
tested her, and I'm like, oh yeah, that didn't take long. She's been in school for a week.
Of course. Of course.
I had to bail out early today, and so I was like, I kind of,
Yeah.
had to text everybody in the chat and be like, hey, I'm gonna be wearing a mask. Stay away from me. I'm testing clean, but like, and so I have to do
Yeah,
that
of
whole
course.
shuffle now of like, oh god, one person throws the wrench in the works. So yeah, that's my N+1 goal. We'll put it that
Yeah,
way.
that's a good goal. I think you'll get there, man. You guys are chugging along.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for coming on the show. We've went long today, so I want to respect the time and get you out of here. How can people find you? How can people find
No
your
sweat.
guitars? How can people follow you?
Sure. KAUER guitars, and that's either at or .com. It's, wherever
Nice.
symbol is correct for that one. No, I appreciate
Nice.
it.
I
I'm
know you're
sorry,
on
I
Insta.
am a conversational black hole. I make all podcasts run
Great.
long.
It makes for a good show. I always say a good guest makes for a good show, and this has definitely been good. We'll put links in the show notes for the links to the website and for your Instagram and all that stuff. But before we go, I got my 2 silly questions that I ask everybody, and you've already dropped
Yes.
a couple, but I always ask everyone to say a sentence or two and casually drop the name of the most famous person you've ever met. Is it Conan, or have you met someone more famous than Conan?
More famous? No, Conan would be the most. Well,
Conan.
I mean, it depends on what circles you run in. Walter Tom DeMont from No Doubt, who was incredibly nice, and I've met him. But boy, Conan would be hard to argue.
Yeah. Well, I'll just give you this second to go ahead and continue name dropping if you want to name drop other people that play your guitars that you know. This is the time.
One that we haven't talked about yet, I'm not sure when this will go live, but Brad Whitford is now a Banshee owner, and we expect,
Nice.
it sounds like we're going to be seeing a Banshee on tour with him and Aerosmith, so that's pretty rad.
Nice.
I haven't met him, but
Dude, that's dope.
yeah, I got the text that he likes it, and
oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's exciting. Yeah,
that is so cool.
Scott from Holiday from Rebel Sons is, he's genuinely. There's a couple of people that like artists of ours that are who I consider genuine friends, and like then there's a handful of artists of ours that are people that I like that I love and are very dear to me people, like Dennis Casey from Flogging Molly, Tom DeMott, and a bunch of those guys, and then. Yeah, Brad's pretty rad. Rich Forrest has got a Banshee now too, and that's kind of cool. We'll see what happens there. He's friends with Scott, and they kind of gift exchanged each other guitars, and so I appreciate that. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, last question, and we'll get you out of here. In your opinion, what is the greatest all-time cartoon theme song?
Cartoon theme song?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're like almost the same age, so we might have a similar answer.
Yeah. Okay. I'll rule out Simpsons because that seems like an obvious pick. I'll go with Doug, the cartoon show from Nickelodeon, for obvious reasons.
That's a good one. Doug is pretty good. Yeah, Doug's good. All right, Doug, thank you so much for coming on to the show. Hey, everybody, thank you for tuning in and listening. Thank you, Doug Cower, for coming on the show. If you have liked this show episode, show your gratitude by clicking like on whatever media you are experiencing this, whether it's YouTube or if you're listening on to any form of podcast player, you can heart it in your podcast player. Another way you can show your appreciation is to share this episode with someone that you think might appreciate it. Just go ahead and click the share button. They appreciate that. Another thing you can do is to visit the Facebook group where we have links, and I will include pictures of my shop tour when I was there a couple of weeks ago. That would be great. So thanks again to Doug for tuning in. And until next time, guys, don't be a jerk.